third grade. I hope you guys all had a wonderful first day of home learning. I wanted to let you know that I love you guys and I miss you guys, and I'm praying for each of you every day. We're going to be back together again really soon, and I just can't wait. But in the meantime, you guys have a great opportunity to keep learning and to keep growing. Anyway, I was thinking that even though we can't be together, we can still share some of our favorite things, and I thought it would be nice to pull out our book of Greek mythology and share a chapter together. I'm not sure how often I'll be able to do a read aloud for you guys, but I thought at the very least we could finish Hercules' story. You'll remember that Hercules, the great hero, son of Zeus, had to perform 10 labors after he was driven mad by Hera. And he completed those 10 labors valiantly, but at the end it was determined that on 2 of them he'd cut some corners, and so he had to complete 2 more, making a total of 12. The first of his additional labors was to go to the garden of the Hesperides, I believe, and to pick an apple from the tree. But only the gods can pick an apple, and so he asked Atlas to pick one for him. And while Atlas was picking the apple, Hercules held up the vault of the sky. But then Atlas decided he was going to try to sneak away, and so Hercules had to trick him and take the apple and return to his cousin. Then he had to travel to the underworld and wrestle with Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, and bring him back up to his cousin Eurystheus. But Eurystheus was such a coward that after Hercules returned with the dog, he leapt into an urn and cowered in fear. And so Hercules allowed Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, to return to the underworld. Then you'll remember that Hera again drove Hercules insane, and he swatted down many men. And as punishment, he had to sit at the feet of Omphale, the queen of Lydia, and dress in a girl's clothes and spin wool for 3 years. And when at last his task was done, he had learned the lesson of humility. So that's where we're going to pick up. He is free at last to roam the world. And again he performed heroic deeds, and his friends were glad to see him back. One of his great friends was Admetus, the king of Thessaly, under whom Apollo had served when he was a slave on earth. To thank Admetus for his kindness, Apollo had persuaded the fates not to cut his thread of life when his time to die had come, so long as Admetus could find someone else willing to die in his place. This would be easy, thought the king. His faithful men were always saying that his life was dearer to them than their own. King Admetus had always been afraid of dying early, for he was happy with his beautiful queen, Aclistus. The king and queen were both fond of Hercules and always welcomed him warmly. But one day, when Hercules came to the palace, King Admetus greeted him alone. He looked sad and downcast. And when Hercules asked him what was wrong, he said nothing except that a woman in his household had died and he must go to her funeral. And he left Hercules alone with the servants. They too looked sad. They waited on him in silence and did not answer his questions. Hercules ate, drank, and made merry alone. And at last he grew impatient, grasped one of the servants, and forced him to speak. The servant told him that the time had come for Admetus to die, and he had turned to his men and asked one of them to die in his stead. But now not one of them had been willing. Admetus then went to his parents, who were old and weary of life, and asked them to die in his stead. They too refused, but when he returned to his palace, he found Queen Aclistus setting off for the realm of the dead. She loved him so much, she said, that she would gladly give her life for him. And the king was so fond of his own life that he let his queen depart. Now the king and all the household were mourning for Aclistus. Hercules shed big tears when he heard this sad story, but being a man of action, he seized his club and strode off to the underworld to force Hades to give Aclistus back. Such a loving wife should not be allowed to die. Hercules did not have to use his club. Cerberus, the great dog, slunk away as he stormed into the palace of Hades. The Lord of the Dead himself had a cold, unloving queen, and he was so moved when Hercules told him of Acleistus' devotion that he let her go. Hercules brought Queen Acleistus back to King Admetus, and the grief in the palace changed to great joy. Now they all ate, drank, and made merry together, and Acleistus grew famous far and wide as the most devoted wife who had ever lived. Hercules, too, wanted a wife, and he chose, and you're going to have to excuse me, students, you know how hard these names are for me. I think it's Deianira, the Caledonian princess, for his bride. Deianira had always been promised to the river god Acleus, but she dreaded the thought of being married to a river god who could change his shape at will. She would never know in which shape her husband would come home at night. She would rather marry the great hero Hercules. The two suitors agreed to wrestle, and the victor would have Princess Deianira. Of course, Hercules won. The river god rushed at him in the shape of a bull, and Hercules seized him by the horn, wrenched it off, and threw him to the ground before he had time to change into something else. So Hercules and Deianira were married and were very happy together. One day, as they were traveling, they came to a swollen stream. Hercules forded it with ease, but Deianira was afraid and stood on the bank. Along came the centaur, Nisus, and politely offered to carry her across. But Nisus, like all centaurs, was very fond of pretty girls, and before he reached midstream, he had made up his mind to carry her off. Once on the other side, he galloped off with her. Deianira screamed for help. Hercules shot a poisoned arrow at the centaur, and Nisus fell to the ground. Before he died, he whispered to Deianira, "Take some of my blood and save it. If you ever fear that you are losing your husband's love, paint some of the blood on his tunic, and he will love you again." So here we see the centaur Nisus offering to help Deianira across the stream. And I don't know if you can see, but in the background there's Hercules not paying attention. And then Nisus carrying her off as she screams for help. All right, let's keep reading. Deianira carefully saved the drops of blood, for she knew well that many a girl would like to steal her magnificent husband. One day, as Hercules was at war, he won a great victory and sent a messenger home for his best tunic. He wanted to celebrate with his men, but Deianira thought he wanted to make himself handsome for some other girl. She painted some of Nisus's blood on the tunic. As soon as Hercules put it on, he felt as though 1,000 fires were burning in his heart. It was not a love potion that Nisus had given Deianira, but a deadly poison of the Hydra from Hercules' arrow mixed with Nisus's blood. Hercules was so strong that the poison could not kill him, but his sufferings were unbearable. He ordered his men to build a funeral pyre. And remember, a pyre is a large pile of wood. It's part of a burial rite. He ordered his men to build a funeral pyre, spread his lion skin over the top of it, and he lay down on it. Then he gave his bow and deadly arrows to his young friend, Philoctetes, as a parting gift. And as the flames rose around him, a loud thunderclap was heard, and Hercules, by the order of Zeus, rose up to Olympus, reclining on his lion's skin. Let me see. So down here you can see the funeral pyre, and there's Hercules going up to Mount Olympus on his lion's skin. And there's the young man who he gave his bow to. The gods welcomed Hercules and were glad to have him with them, for the fates had predicted that Olympus would be attacked by a fearful enemy, and the Olympians could be saved only if the strongest man ever born fought on their side. The prediction soon came to pass. In a last effort to defeat the mighty thunder god, Mother Earth had given birth to 50 snake-legged giants who surrounded Olympus and tried to storm the palace. They seemed unconquerable, for like Admetus, who Hercules had fought on Earth. They sprang up again, revived, as soon as they touched Mother Earth. Hercules knew what to do, and with his help, the gods won over the giants and cast them into the dismal pit of Tartarus. Hercules was now the hero of Mount Olympus, beloved by all the gods. Even Hera begged him to forgive her and gave him her daughter Hebe, the goddess of eternal youth, for his Olympian bride. From then on, Hercules lived in eternal bliss, forever a joy to the gods. His father Zeus was very pleased. That's the end of Hercules' story. Well, I'm glad we got to share that together. I think that I'm going to try to do this as often as I can, but in the meantime, why don't you go to your parents and you guys can talk about what does it mean to be a man of action? Or girls, what does it mean to be a woman of action? And how did we see that in Hercules' story? All right, I'll talk to you guys really soon. Bye.